be here with you. We're thinking about coming here. One of the places to start is with gratitude and appreciation for the meeting, for all of you and for all of you, those of you who aren't here today, but still are part of the meeting, part of this community. Special gratitude to the Colombia Ministry Committee, to Jennifer and Walter and Terry and Howard, and Larry. It has been true. Very nice. Thank you very much. Thank you to Erica and the ongoing connection with friendly notes. That's been a very important way of staying connected. Thank you to Heather Cook, and she helps with sort of any sort of banking connections connected with Noah's Ark. To all of you, and I think that the connection has been made possible because there's been a real intentionality to make it possible, and there's been a structure that has kept us connected. I say that because I think that's real important. I want to say a little bit more about that, but I think that one of the important factors of being constituted as a meeting, even organizationally constituted, it helps keeps us connected. That's really important. When I read the friendly notes and see all that's going on here, it's really awesome. Not only the meeting event itself, but there's the Circle of Light group. There's the work against the death penalty and with the people who are on death row. There's the Austin tan cerca de la frontera that continues. There's something that was sort of new to me was this. I think it's called the Free Fridge Project. Is that right? Of providing food to people in need of food. And also, I think that you help with clothing through the Trinity Center. That's great. And Carol and I were talking about wanting to think of the presence in the Colombia Ministry as another one of the areas of action of the meeting, right? That's what it is. And I guess what we want to do today is tell you about that, tell you what we've been about, and I wrote down some notes here. What I wanted to say is that it's been. We were talking with Mary just a little bit ago, but we came to the meeting 36 years ago. I think it was in 1987, just a few weeks after our older son Elias was born. So we've been connected for 36 years, and that's pretty amazing. And many of you perhaps know, but just to go over that, we were here, we actively participated in the meeting, and then the meeting supported the clearance project, crossing the river, stay here or go to Colombia. And out of that came the clearance to go. And so we've been there now for 32 years. Yeah. Of that, and Um, and we, our two sons grew up there with us, and when we went there, we we went initially to a rural area, and I'm going to just show you a couple of slides of kind of where we were for those of you who who haven't yet visited. Please consider yourselves all very, very much. We'd love to see you. Right? For some reason, it's not sure why it's not projected green, but I guess you can see it there, right? This is the area where we were. It's a rural area north of Bogota. Unshare. And then yeah, I didn't figure out how to unshare. So. Oh, your screen is shared. Was I think press F5. Well, see, I'm on Linux. I'm not on Microsoft Office, so I mean on Microsoft, so that may make a difference. But I don't know why it's not sharing, but I guess you can see. Anyway, we went to this rural community, and we worked in community citizen participation projects and in health. And we were there for 4 years, and then we went to Bogota, and there Carol worked in health for the project for victims of violence and of the displacement. There's an estimated 8 million or so people that were victims and were displaced, and many of them came to the capital where we were. I worked initially with projects of nonviolence training, peace building, conscientious objection, and then after that worked in projects having to do with supporting church organizations in accompaniment trauma issues for people who had been displaced by the war. And the churches were an important place for that because in addition to whatever sort of personal accompaniment they might do, they also were important as sort of a welcoming community. And welcoming community can be a very healing place for people. So we worked in that, and years passed. And now, more recently, neither of us is formally employed, formally working, but we want to say a bit more about what we're doing. Now, when we initially the community that we were with in the rural area was Catholic except for the two of us. When we moved to the city, then I particularly became very involved with the Mennonite church in the city, but we also continued a relationship with a group of the people that we had worked on in the rural area. And we meet with a small group of them every Sunday in a kind of a worship sharing format. And we also participated in a month, once a month, prayer group within the Taizé tradition. I don't know if you're aware of the Taize. It's a form of prayer through music, perhaps, is through singing. This is an ecumenical based in France. Meaningful thing as well. There was a small friends group in Bogota initially, but as far as we know, it's no longer exists. We met initially with them. One of the important people in the group died, and two of them, well, two of them died. It was like two families, and so it hasn't continued. And so I want to tell you a little bit I want to show you a little bit about Bogota. Not sort of a tourist thing, but more to give you an idea of how we move about. So this is the Bogota is in the mountains, but this is now a view from the city of where we are. And I was thinking this morning that it's nice to come to the northern hemisphere where it's warm, because where we live in the tropics, it's pretty cold right now, pretty chilly. But anyway,
because of the altitude.
This is about, well, what is it in feet? About 8,000.
2,800 meters, 8,000 something feet.
Yeah. So this is how we get around in buses, and this is what buses look like in the early morning. They fill up to where people hardly fit in. It's a city of some 8 million plus people, and the bus is the main. So I just took these pictures because I thought it was illustrative of what it's like. So, and I took a picture of this because this is when we go to the health service. There's a big waiting line. And the little screen you see on the right there is where your name comes up when you're supposed to go up to be attended to. The health system has its problems, but it's more. It has, with certain difficulties, it's pretty much universal coverage, but there are long waits. But anyway, and there are lots of people. I want to see a little bit more of that in a little bit. I took this picture because these are stands on the street. A lot of people make a living by just selling things on the street. You know, you can, and it's a very typical thing that in the morning people will buy something on their way to work. I took this because this is also very typical. I don't know if you can see this guy, but he's selling face masks. People will sell face masks, they'll sell garbage bags, they'll sell what they can to make a living. This now is sort of one of the areas where we walk when we have to get from one place to another. We're particularly fortunate because there are trees there. These are the shops where we go to get, if we have to get, this is a butcher shop. This is sort of a little bit of a general store. In fact, this is sort of what it looks like inside. That's where we get supplies. And this is the bakery where we. So
It didn't change.
So this is just to sort of say we walk to where, I would say we walk about an hour a day. Sometimes just for exercise, but often because we have to go one place or another. So walking and the buses are the way we mostly get around. So I just wanted to sort of say that to give you a bit of an idea. And for those of you who may remember our sons, this is Lucas, the younger son. This is Elias, the older son, who were born here in Austin before we. Well, Elias was actually born in Galveston, and we came here, and then
they both have girlfriend, partners, life companions, at least for the last few years. Stephanie is Elias's partner, and Catalina is Lucas's. Lucas and Cata live in Bogota, a couple blocks from where we live. Elias and Stephanie live in Portland, very far away.
So just to say a few more things about Colombia. Colombia is if you're aware, it's sort of on the northwest corner of South America. So it's the country that has an Atlantic and Pacific Ocean coast, and it's the gateway for the many people who are crossing over to come to the U.S. across the border. I was telling some of you that in spite of whatever efforts are being made otherwise, there is an estimated 2,500 or more people that are crossing every day through from Colombia to Panama. I just read the other day that Panama has now said they're going to deport everybody who enters Panama. Well, without proper documentation. So who knows what that be a real bureaucratic snafu in addition to the hardship that's going to cause people. Colombia is on the border with Venezuela, and there are an estimated 3 million Venezuelans in Colombia now who have crossed over. Colombia basically has an open border with Venezuela, although probably 80% of the people who cross over actually do not go through the formal border crossing, but through one of the trails that exist, one of the many trails that exist. There are many reasons for that. One of them is that it's pretty difficult to get a passport in Venezuela, and so it's difficult to enter legally. Colombia has also instituted a procedure to give Venezuelans temporary documentation so they can be there legally. Children are welcome in the schools and in the health, and people have access to health. If you don't have the document, it's much more complicated. But the documentation process is slow. But to me, it's significantly indicative that the government has basically had an open door to Venezuelans coming in, and in fact, at high level, they argue that economically for Colombia, it's good that Venezuelans come over. It's so I mean, officially it's they're welcome. There's still discrimination, but but I think it's a significant positive attitude. And but you see a lot of people. I want to say a little bit about the work with migrants through the Mennonite Church. But just before saying that, something else about Colombia that I want to say is that Colombia has a lot of people. Although there was a peace accord with a major guerrilla group in 1915, 1916,
1915?
2015, I'm sorry. There continues to be a lot of violence, and there are other guerrilla groups, plus there are groups dedicated to drug trafficking. At this point, under the aegis of the Mexican cartels, but it's bad. The situation is bad, particularly in the rural areas. Community leaders, but not only there. Colombia continues to be one of the most unequal societies in the world. And there's also corruption. Yeah.
Unequal in what sense? Unequal in what sense?
Equal in what sense? In the various measures of not just income, but sort of the various measures of quality of life
Between upper and lower classes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah. But I wanted to say that there are actually for me, some real signs of hope in Colombia. And I think significantly, in some ways for me, hopeful for the United States. And just to mention a few of those, I mentioned the peace accords, and I see that as a positive thing because it's been groups have been at each other for years, and for them to finally be able to sit down and come to some agreements about how to stop. I mean, I think that's important. Right now, with this new government administration, there are two guerrilla groups which are now also in peace negotiations. So, to me, it's an indication that things take a long time, but that peace initiatives are possible, and there are initiatives around restorative justice, around reconciliation. One of the things that came out of the peace accords, which has been moving along not only through that but in other ways, there's a whole structure of the Truth Commission, and they've issued a report after gathering many stories. There's a whole structure of transitional justice, which is within certain criteria. If people, both from the state forces as well as the non-state forces, come forward with the truth of what they've done, they can enter into a process of not only reduced sentences, but actually doing restoration and community work instead of being in prison. And I wanted to show you this picture here. This was this week. It says this was at one of the universities near where we are. It says, the truth of the conflict, the transforming voice of victims. This person here is now demobilized, but he was, I guess you might call him the commander-in-chief of the FARC, which was the major guerrilla organization. This man here was a colonel in the army. This woman here was the wife of a man who was killed under the orders of this colonel. And the woman whose nose you see, well, if it were bigger, you'd see it.
Behind the colonel?
Behind the colonel. I'm sorry I can't make this bigger, but but anyway, her family were victims of the FARC, of the commander. The woman here in the middle is a newspaper, is a news reporter who was sort of facilitating the conversation. So this was in front of a group of people, large group of people. There were other victims over here that are not in the picture. And so they were talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking to each other, and this was not the first time they had met. This was part of a process that got there. But the colonel was able to say, you know, I murdered your husband. And how that happened wasn't, he said, because he gave the order. He didn't go out and shoot himself, but he gave the order of something that's been called, in Colombia, called false positives. The reason they call them false positives is because the army would take people, ordinary, typically men, they would kidnap them, dress them up as guerrilla, shoot them, and then present them as guerrilla killed in combat, as a way of
Showing numbers of how the army was being successful in eliminating guerrilla.
and he said, you know, everybody knew that was happening from top down, but that doesn't exempt any of us from saying we're not responsible. I'm responsible. I gave the order, and it was, as you can imagine, a very moving account. And the commander of the FARC said something similar to the woman whose family had been killed by the FARC. So I think that's very hopeful. That's a very hopeful sign that is happening. Another hopeful sign is the proposals for healthcare, for the reform of the health system, the educational system, and the labor system. The current government is talking about healthcare as a right, not as a service or a business. And I say that because the current government is trying to reach accords with the other parties in Congress around around policy issues. I say all this not because they're accomplishing it, because things happen slowly and there's a lot of back and forth. But what I think is significant is the language difference. To speak of health, for example, healthcare, not as a service, but as a right that you have. That's a change. To speak of education as a right, that's very significant. Just to have institutions have as their main policy, and this government having as its main policy total peace. So what language does, it begins to change people's way of thinking. And, so I think that more than changes take place slowly, but to begin talking in a different language makes a difference. So, a little bit of what we do. Yeah. Okay. So you've been very supportive of Noah's Ark, and thank you very much. Noah's Ark, really, thank you. It's been a lifeline to so many people, and it continues to be. When it started, it was a lot of helping people who were displaced by the war and the violence. That whole displacement movement has changed. It's not the same as it was now. Now it's more helping people who are caught in a system and in a situation that they really find no clear way out. And so it's helping people to survive and hopefully to find ways of getting back on their feet, helping people around illness and healthcare issues. I want to say about some of the other things that I've been involved, just thinking about this these last months before and now the month that's coming. I work with the Justice and Peace Committee of the Mennonite Church, which has an ongoing work with migrants, with Venezuelan migrants, helping with economic stabilization, with social support. Should have, but I can't bring it up. With food and basically helping them. These are people. So many of the people who come, who we know, they're people with just so limited resources and terrible health problems and often living on the street. So there's help with that. Helping with we have a group that we call the Creation Care Group, which is trying to work on environmental issues. And this coming Saturday, there's going to be a meeting with other churches to think about how to do that. With someone from the church, we're working with church leaders in different parts around the topic of what we're calling healthy boundaries, which is to address proper use of proper relating around issues of power and sexuality in church leadership. We worked on I helped design, and then other people implemented a workshop on nonviolence and peace building for young people, because it's something that we have been so involved in, but how do you pass on the baton and to young people about that? So that seemed important. Time is running on. I think I'll stop. And
No?
we go to 10 till, yes?
Yes, that's right.
Just one other thing to say. I'm also representing something called Mennonite World Conference for the Andean region. Mennonite World Conference is sort of a platform, what would be the word in English, but that sort of brings together churches of that Anabaptist tradition from all over the world into a context where they can meet, listen to each other, learn from each other, and so forth. And so I connect with churches of that tradition, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. And connected with that is that I was at a meeting on Friday, which is planning a visit of the Mennonite pastor, professor from Germany, and also the person who's the head of the the Peace Commission, who's actually from Colombia, but lives in Holland right now. They're going to be coming in October. Connect with the fact that his professor, the pastor professor, and a Methodist from Argentina are the two World Council of Church representatives to the peace negotiations that are happening now in Colombia. As sort of observed, they've been invited to be there as observers, and so we were kind of setting up some meetings where they could also meet with the churches and talk about that, in addition to being in the negotiating setting. So that's part of what I've been involved in. Just to say that I think that go ahead and say something, because I want to add something else, but you say.
Fine.
I just wanted to say that I think that the importance of it's important to recognize that whatever we do, we don't do it alone. We do it as part of a collective effort, and I think that our calling as churches, as meetings, is not only to walk in the light, but to be light. In my way of thinking, to be part of to be perhaps a small and that's not perfect at all, but example to the larger society of what the peaceable kingdom might be. And I think that's an important thing. But in Christian terms, I think it also means being here and now, the presence of Jesus. Walking and being collectively followers of Jesus in this, that's how I think about it, is in this world. And so there's pain in the community, but there's also promise in who we are and what we're being. And I was talking to somebody the other day who was saying, well, you know, governments come and governments go. But what we do, we persist and we continue in the witness and action. That's what sustains, that's part of what sustains and helps processes keep going. Nice being there with Carol. I know she says she's not going to say anything.
Gonna leave time for questions.
But even different ways.
Yeah.
You do it with yourself.
That's okay. Well, I mostly keep the home fires burning, and I kind of I was never in my professional life much at home, much of a housewife, much of a homemaker. And so since I retired, I really enjoy just doing the things that need to be done, not rushing, being able to do things, take time to do things. And as we say, our life there is everything we do by walking. So we don't go do a major grocery shopping where we bring a car full of things. We're going every day to get this or that, or getting doctor's appointments, getting medication, the daily things that need to be done to keep our life going take a different kind of time than they do here. And so that's what I do. And I'm very happy to be part of the team that does the Martha work of logistics, and I enjoy it.
I want to say something else about Karen.
Well, I just want to say something else. Even things like you want to make a salad, And so you go and buy your lettuce, but then I have to wash it, I have to soak it to get rid of the amoebas. And then, so that just getting food ready takes a couple hours. So somebody has to do that, and I'm happy to do it. So. And what Paul's going to say is that I also accompany people. That in the last few years, I've spent a lot of time being with people who need, mostly family, that have had like a major accident, or my sister now has been dealing with cancer. And so I've spent months at a time accompanying family members who need me to be there, or who need somebody to be there. And so that's been nice to have the freedom to do that, to be able to go be with family when they need it. And also friends in Colombia that have needed accompaniment of different sorts. And so I have the flexibility, since I don't have obligations that require me to be somewhere at a certain time. I can organize my time to be. So that's nice.
Very important.
Are there questions? We have 3 minutes.
I was curious if you could speak to the religious landscape, and if you see sort of how people, like, I'm wondering what the contrasts are with how people approach faith in the United States, and whether it looks differently and how it looks differently in Colombia, sort of the landscape of how people practice their faith and how it is involved in public life.
There is, what shall I say? There is, historically, Colombia was Catholic, which means that about religious life, yeah.
Yes, religious landscape.
Yeah, but sort of how people live it, if there's differences.
Well, some people live it just nominally. I mean, that's how they were raised, whatever it is. There are. I think that, and there are some very large churches, or the evangelical tradition, and there is, and then there's smaller groups that I think respond to in a different way.
About this. I mean, when I was in Colombia, what was that, 10 years ago? You were doing a large
I think I did.
meeting, like symposium,
Did you just get out? Go ahead.
a large meeting symposium with church members about trauma healing and working with the displaced. It seems to me there's a lot more engagement in work of peace building and receiving people who are displaced in Colombia than we see here. Well, but I would say that is within the context of the Mennonite Church, which is a very small church. I think that in general, if you're looking at Colombia, in terms of faith, there's nominal Catholicism, just like I imagine here, there's nominal Protestantism in general. And there's the newer churches that are more evangelical and not very, in general, I don't know how engaged they are in like social change or trauma healing. And I mean, I would just say that sad example is within the context of the church or the people that we're involved with. I don't think it would be a general, I don't know that I would say that it's a large group. Yeah.
But maybe to add, for example, that I think there is a whole sector of the evangelical tradition that is very worried about gender issues, for example, And when the peace accords were put to a vote, a sort of a plebiscite, they voted against the peace accords because they were afraid that it was going to introduce what they call gender ideology into the schools. So that's so a big sector of the Catholic Church as well. But so, I mean, I think there's just kind of a range of things, actually. I think also that young people probably tend to be less involved in religious practices than the older generation.
I'm so sorry.
And this
We
is,
are very out of time. But I believe they will be here after worship if you have other questions. Volunteer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.